Thanks for downloading this episode from Teachers Talk Radio. You can find the full schedule and listen back to all our shows at ttradio.org. Enjoy the podcast.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Teachers Talk Radio, the late show. Really delighted to be here with such an important topic to discuss this evening, which is all things teacher recruitment and retention. So we're going to get stuck into that very, very soon. Just before we start, it would be a really good point for me to mention that the show tonight is supported very kindly by My New Term. So if you have ever applied for a job and thought, do you know what? I need to apply for 10 jobs and I don't want to apply again and again with different application forms. I've done that and I literally hated it. So My New Term are the solution to that problem. So if you haven't checked them out already, please do. And I know that Wayne from My New Term is going to be joining us tonight, which is really, really exciting, sharing their insights in terms of what they have been doing to support the crisis, and we are going to use the word crisis, that has sort of, what word should I use? Enveloped the profession. And I think we've always said, oh, there's a problem with teacher recruitment and retention. I think we've always said that in the last, 15 to 20 years. But I think in the last year or two, I think since 2020, I feel as though things have escalated. It's not just how I feel. If you look at the statistics, if you look at the numbers joining the profession, the targets of people entering ITT, so initial teacher training, aren't being hit. I think there's only 2 subjects out of 20 plus where the targets have been hit for recruiting into initial teacher training. The numbers leaving the profession are still significantly higher than what the government and everybody else would want them to be. You've still got that famous statistic of, I think it's 1 in 3 quit in the first 5 years of teaching and things like this. I mean, those statistics still exist. And not only that, I think COVID, and we will discuss this in the show this evening, I think COVID has made teachers think to themselves, do you know what? I want to change my lifestyle and I want to work more flexibly and I want to change the way in which I'm approaching, whether that be getting a part-time job, whether that be working in a school where flexi working is supported, whether that be perhaps, a lot of teachers weirdly have actually applied for jobs in online schools. There's been a massive growth in teachers thinking, do you know what, I've liked working from home. So actually what I'm going to do now is I'm going to work in a virtual school. So actually, there's a whole raft of things there that we will sort of explore this evening in the show. Now, I've got 3 special guests. I'll introduce I'll introduce Wayne to start with. Wayne, we'll just check you're there. We'll check you can hear us if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, good evening, Tom. I am here.
Good evening. How are you today?
I'm really good, thank you. Yeah, are you well?
Not too bad, not too bad. So listen, let's sort of get into this because there's such a huge amount to discuss this evening. And we've got... I think I should start really by asking you to introduce yourself and what you do and why you're on this show with me this evening.
Yeah, I can certainly do that. So I think it might be therefore helpful if I kind of almost go back in time and tell the story a little bit in terms of how My New Term came about and how I kind of end up to where I am today. So if I go back to over 10 years ago now, I was studying at the University of Northumbria in Newcastle, completed my degree, and then I went off and worked in industry for a little while. All the while, I kind of always had this feeling that I would go into teaching, and an opportunity came up for a bursary to go into teaching, and so I took that opportunity and I went to study at the University of Bedfordshire and did a PGC in secondary mathematics. Enjoyed my time doing that, really loved it, but it was during my PGC year that I realised that there was a real problem that I kind of stumbled across. And that problem was applying for jobs to work in schools. And I just thought it was a ridiculous process that you had to go through. As a candidate, you had to complete this long, ridiculous application form that a school was requesting. Typically, it was a Word document, which can be incredibly difficult to format and fill in, and especially when you need to include things such as your full employment history. And what I found was obviously completing that and then submitting it, let's say, to a particular school, would take you a good 2 to 3 hours to do it properly and do it well. But then, of course, if you wanted to apply to the next school down the road, for example, or the next one, you had to complete their own form themselves. So you had to repeat all the details you've just added on this first one and then submit it to the next school. And it was a problem that had effectively come about by the academy sector. And what I mean by that is historically, before then, it was predominantly local authorities. So there would be one application form across a local authority, and therefore that application form could be used across multiple schools. With the academy sector, it basically meant that each school was then, or each academy trust was creating their own application process and their own form, whether that be, a Word document and they kind of rebrand it, if you like, or, not really much at that time. But nowadays, more are going obviously digitally. So it was my own personal experience that really kind of, where I stumbled across the process to apply for jobs, thought this is ridiculous. It can be just done so much better. So I then conducted research with my peer group, as in the people that I was training with. Was it just me that was feeling like this, or was it everybody else? And it very much was everyone else in my peer group. And then I also did research with a number of schools as well. And I found out that actually schools spend an awful lot of money on recruitment through advertising services, through recruitment agencies, money that I felt was just, wasted in many cases. So that's where the idea came from. And I set about creating what I believed was a digital solution to solve the problem, to standardize the application process to apply for jobs in education, to solve the problem I was facing, that as a teacher, it was just taking an absolute age to apply directly to schools. And many of my peers at the time decided to go down the recruitment agency route. Because it was just so much easier to give an agency your CV, off they go, and they obviously then come back to you with available opportunities. But of course, obviously that costs schools huge amounts of money in finder's fees. So that really kind of summarizes, the story, the backstory, and then subsequently, I've gone on to go and create that particular solution. First time I did create it, it did actually fail, but subsequently it's now gone on and it's used by thousands of schools across the country.
Yeah, which is incredible. And I mean, how long's it been going for, Wayne? My new term. How long has it existed as a platform?
So we formally launched it in September 2017, but we kind of did a bit of a soft launch and we gave it away free to schools in a very small geographical area, starting off in Luton and then expanding slightly out into central Bedfordshire. And it's really grown since then. So obviously then COVID hit in the early part of 2020, as we all know, and that really slowed things down. So it's really kind of kicked on since about March 21. So it's been, going properly for since September 2017, but it's really since, the middle of 2021 that it's now started to get a bit more of a national presence, if you like.
Got you. And obviously you run a very successful and big sort of organization that deals directly with teacher recruitment, right? So you are a person who has a handle on what is going on right now. So I wanted to ask you, Wayne, from your perspective, since 2017, since you started doing this, and it was probably prior to 2017, wasn't it, that you started to research it and all the rest of it? But, in that time frame, is this the most challenging time there has been for schools in terms of recruiting teachers in general?
I think broadly speaking, I'd say yes, it is. The dynamics have changed and they continue to change. But this at the moment is seeming to be the most challenging period. And I go back to the early years, or even before when I'd launched my new term, there was still a lot of talk about recruitment challenges, in particular in what I would classify as the shortage subjects, typically in secondary. So if you looked at your maths and your sciences, computer science, they were the ones that were obviously attracting the big bursaries for people to obviously go into teaching. And if you remember, there was huge amounts of discussion and ongoing nature in relation to that. So that commentary, if you like, has gone on for a considerable amount of time, and that's not changed. However, I've noticed some big things that have kind of changed, within the past couple of years. So firstly, the kind of one thing that really happened kind of during and post-COVID was support staff. So this could be obviously teaching assistants and those sort of people that are working within schools. And it was really noticeable at the decline in applications that schools were starting to receive for a number of support roles. We can put this down to a number of different factors, but some things would include, for example, obviously post-COVID, there are now many more opportunities to work from home. There are many more opportunities that people can work more flexibly. There is obviously within the private sector, if you like, and industry more generally, wages have really increased, and you can go and work at Amazon and in supermarkets, typically speaking, for higher wages than you can working in some school settings, especially if it's term time only roles, for example. So we noticed a real decline in that during that particular period, and that's kind of one thing that obviously started. And then really, there's been a prolonged period now of certain teacher subjects has become a real challenge. The shortage subjects hasn't gone away. If anything, it's been exacerbated. But then it's also crept into other subject areas, other specialisms. But I really should, highlight that there is a real variation geographically across the country, big differences, and also differences in age ranges. So obviously, I know we're going to be joined very soon by guest Kate Fay, and she'll talk about her experiences as a primary ECT applying for jobs in a particular area of the country that really isn't facing any challenges at all. It's almost the opposite end of the spectrum. Whereas obviously we can easily go into and speak to many a school that are finding it incredibly difficult to recruit for certain specialisms. And obviously I know we're joined by Sufyan, who'll be able to go into that into great detail.
Fantastic. And I wanted sort of just to dig in a little bit more on that before we move past that is the variation that you mentioned. Can you give me a specific example of that, if possible, Wayne?
Yeah. So I am aware of a school in the Yorkshire area that has received in excess of 70 applications for a class teacher vacancy. This is primary in this particular regard, whereas in different areas, and I would say also rural primary schools or rural schools more generally do find it again increasingly challenging, especially if they're particularly small and it could be multiple year groups. It is not uncommon at times, depending on where they're at, that they would receive 0, 1, 2 applications in comparison. So it really does have some big variances across the country, and likewise also does the independent sector. In terms of that.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and we'll bring Kate in now, hopefully. Kate, if you want to unmute yourself, hopefully, yep, there you are. Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you? You okay?
Yeah, great, thank you. You?
Not too bad. Now, I think you have just secured your first role for September, is that right?
I have indeed, yes.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Do you want to talk us through sort of the process of you sort of getting that role to date?
Yeah, sure. So I was looking for something within the Nottinghamshire, Lincolnshire area, and lots of things that Wayne's already mentioned. Really, trying different formats. There's been a couple of different application tracking systems that I've had to use. or with some schools they just have their own application form entirely.
What do you mean by that, Kate? Can you just sort of expand on that in terms of the application tracking forms?
So some schools have obviously bought into things like My New Term, where that people are applying to jobs through their application tracking system. So
got you.
So My New Term, which was actually the easiest one to use, I was actually praying that a job would come up through My New Term that I could apply for, because it was so easy, and I knew that all of my information was going to be saved, and that way I would just have to tweak my personal statement and I could apply for a job really easily.
Now we don't want to blow Wayne's trumpet too much
I know.
in terms of this, but I would like you to tell me why My New Term has been great for you.
Yeah. Okay. So, as I've mentioned, that it saves all of my details, whereas other applicant tracking systems that I try to use, they don't. So you would apply for a job and you would still have to then start all over again. And I'm a mature student, I'm in my late 30s. I have quite a lengthy career history. So you have to do that all the way to when you left school. And that takes a while, doesn't it? So that was frustrating when you to have to repeat to do that, especially when using an applicant tracking system. Whereas with My New Term, I knew that everything is already saved on there. And I was just tweaking my personal statement then in consideration of whatever school I needed to apply for. But also the fact that it's just the whole platform I find is really user friendly. I think it is very modern and quite well laid out. And I really like orange, so that's a bonus too. All of it was great. In the end, the actual school that I applied and I got a job with, they had their own application form, just a form. So it was that's how I applied for it, and I had to put all my details on. And that is with a more rural school within the Nottinghamshire area.
Let me ask you, Kate, how many jobs did you go for before getting the one you got now, if you don't mind me asking?
That's okay. No, I applied for 2 in the Lincolnshire area, and when I asked just for feedback, they just said that they'd had 35 applicants for one job.
Okay.
That's
nice, isn't it?
Just reiterating the things that Wayne's kind of already touched on, that in some areas you seem to have a wealth of teachers applying for just a few positions, and whether or not that actually is a hint towards the retention issue, rather than there, not being enough, being too many jobs for
and was this the Lincolnshire area, did you say?
Yeah, it was. Yeah.
So it's interesting, isn't it? The sort of like Wayne said, the regional variation on these roles and these jobs. I wanted to say, Kate, do you think the application process, because you've just got this role for September, do you think actually the way in which the application process is generally done and the differences around that, and particularly sort of the arduous nature of it in terms of having to fill in 10 different application forms if you want to go for 10 different jobs in teaching, and some of them ask for different things when you go to apply. Do you think that's an actual problem in terms of, was there a point where you thought, do you know what, I can't be bothered with this?
Well, I applied for this one of the jobs before Easter, and I just thought, I'm just going to leave it now for a little while, because I just did think, it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort for jobs that potentially I'm not even going to get an interview for. So it was off-putting, I think, but and I think that other people that I know from my teacher training colleagues have had similar experiences where they've applied for jobs and there've been too many applicants, so they've not been given an interview. And I think it can be a bit demoralising, but I understand the reasoning for needing sort of that background information, particularly when you're working within education. So,
but I can sort of see why you were saying, oh, do you know what? I wish I could get a job through My New Term, for the simple fact that you, correct me if I'm wrong here, and Wayne can correct me if I'm wrong, but basically you log onto the site, you set up a profile, you upload, you know, whatever you need to upload, and then you can use that to apply for however many jobs you want to apply for.
Yeah, you have your personal profile, so it's got once you've put in all of that information about your work history, any gaps in employment, that's all just saved on there then for you, and that's the laborious part of it, isn't it? So
absolutely. And then the schools themselves, and Wayne might need to come here on this bit, but the schools themselves who sign up to My New Term, they can sort of say, right, this is what we want, and then it all goes through My New Term, the actual application process.
Yeah, I'm sure that's a way
Wayne will pop in on that. Is that right, Wayne? I think that's right, isn't it?
Yeah, that's basically exactly it. And you know, there are some real big benefits for schools doing that. You know, digitizing the process makes it attractive to candidates. It's about streamlining it, and obviously, like Kate's experience, about making it as easy as possible, solving that problem that I set out at the very beginning about why I created the first place. Let's just make the process for candidates as easy as possible, whether you're applying to be a cleaner, a teaching assistant, a teacher, a head teacher. All the details that school require are the same. We can standardise it in the main, apart from a personal statement that can make it really, you know, personal for schools. But if a school receives, you know, 20, 30 applications for a job, that creates a lot of workload. It creates a lot of workload for somebody to schedule those interviews, to complete those references, and obviously notify unsuccessful applicants, which is, to be honest, my biggest bugbear when I was applying for jobs in schools, that schools just didn't let you know, and it was kind of, it just goes into the ether. Whereas our system makes it very easy to notify, let's say, the 30 unsuccessful people with a really nice personalized message, but it takes the school all of 30 seconds to do it. And it's just about streamlining that process for employers to make it as easy and as seamless as possible to just manage things digitally. And, you know, schools and people working in offices within schools, or business managers, are incredibly busy people. And there's lots to do, and therefore this is just one facet within their role, and therefore it's about streamlining it from their perspective as much as it is from a candidate point of view.
And I know you mentioned, like, from a school perspective, that they save a lot of money through this. Can you explain sort of why they do that? Because I know how expensive it is for schools to advertise for jobs on some platforms. So can you sort of explain? There must be multiple facets to this in terms of how they save money.
Yeah, there really is. And you could go into this in lots of different areas. To be honest, the best person to probably answer this question is Sufyan, who will be on later.
Well, he'll be on in about 5 minutes. Sufyan, let's check he's actually there. Sufyan, are you there? I'm not sure he's there, you know. Sufyan, you might need to recall back in, actually. You're listed as a speaker, but I can't hear you. So maybe admin can DM you as well. Oh, here we go. Got a request for him now, so we'll see if that works. But yeah, we'll speak to him in 5 minutes' time. But
I'm here.
Yeah,
I'm here, by the way.
Oh, there he is. He's here. Sufyan, we were just saying there, in terms of, because what I'm going to talk to you about is all the different strategies to try and manage and deal with the challenge of teacher recruitment and retention, right? Particularly teacher recruitment, but schools trying to recruit, right?
Yeah.
But I wanted to. That would be a really good segue just before we talk about any of that. Is what Wayne's just said in terms of how My New Term, which I believe you use, might help a school or save a school money when it comes to this sort of advertising for jobs, getting candidates, their applications, and so on. I don't know whether you can go into that a little bit if you would.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest shortfalls in the system is the fact that actually we talk about schools being more prudent, financially prudent around trying to manage their budgets, but the amount schools spend on advertising posts and re-advertising posts in really expensive outlets, what we find is the data. The most important thing about My New Term is the intelligence that it gives us. So we get lots of rich data that tells us how far are people traveling for our roles? So if we know that in Luton, people are traveling typically 3 miles to their school, why on earth would I need to advertise in a national paper when actually the last 100 recruitments we've made are 80% of them are traveling less than 15 miles in total? So that intelligence allows you to be better prepared around how you target the people you want to target and what approaches you take. And I'll come on to that a bit later on. And so I think that element of the data is probably really important, but also talent management. So that pipeline of talent, you have 5 people apply for a history job in a great school. You have a school down the road where nobody applies. How do you harness the talent of the 4 credible candidates that didn't get the job in school A? How do you keep them on your talent profile? So one of the things that we really effectively use is our talent pool on My New Term. Anyone who's ever shown an interest in working for us, we're strongly trying to recommend go up onto our talent pool, because if you're on our talent pool, every time a vacancy comes up, I know where to look, I know what to look for, and I can go back and see, actually, you were a great candidate. You just marginally missed out to somebody else, but you could do a fantastic job, and now an opportunity has arisen. We're really interested in speaking to you. So managing that talent pipeline before your vacancies occur, and also those that are unsuccessful, how do you make sure that in a climate where it's so ultra competitive that you don't want to say goodbye to anyone? So even if it is a goodbye, it's never goodbye from us. It's a temporary, we'll see you later. It's not right now, but we
I'm sure
definitely
I'm sure, Sufyan, that you've just dropped about 20 different song lyrics into the last 1 minute of sort of commentary. It was like, goodbye is not a goodbye, and sometimes it's not enough to say goodbye. And, you know, we could go through them all. Honestly, I think you're a songwriting genius in the making. But I was could you just go in a little bit more on this idea of the talent pool for me in terms of what that is? Because some people might be confused. You're talking about talent pool. I get it. It's I'm guessing what you mean here is there's a pool of people who have shown an interest in jobs at your school who you can then tap into through My New Term.
So the idea, traditionally, you had a vacancy and you put your vacancy out and you have dozens of people that apply. And in the good times, whether we like to admit they were good times or not, but you had multiple applications, and there were times when people would get a job and they'd punch the air in celebration they've got a job. Right now, you have people graduating from ITT that go for 6 interviews and get all 6 offered to them, and they just see that as a default. When you go to apply for a job, you get the job. A lot of people see that as a default, especially in areas where there's very high competition and low supply. So for us, the talent pool function on their system and on their platform is, throughout the year, my job and the job of colleagues that work in our schools is to ensure that we're constantly looking to develop links, see people that are interested in working for us, people who miss out on opportunities to work for us. And we say to them, look, it didn't work out this time, but we're really interested in you and you've got a lot to offer. If you join our talent pool, when the right opportunity occurs, and it may not be this school, what we can do is come back to you and say, you expressed an interest for working with Chiltern Learning Trust, and now I'm really interested because school B down the road doesn't have a history teacher, and I really want you to come along and work for us in that school. And when I've got a talent pool of 70, 80, 120 people that I can call on when a vacancy comes up, the worst that can happen is somebody says, look, I've taken a job, not right now. Well, that's great, but actually I want to stay in touch, because with the competition the way it is in the market, I want to make sure that we stay in touch, and we'll check back in a year's time. And if you're still happy where you are, fine. But if you're still looking to work for us and you really want to work for us, and if you're on our talent pool, it's a bit like you're still on that dating website. And if you're on the website, it's fair game for me to contact you.
Sufyan, please don't mention Edudate on Teachers Talk Radio. It's very inappropriate, actually, to mention teacher dating.
I just thought I knew Edudate were listening in, so I wanted to give that little plug.
But I wanted to ask, in terms of, because if you were to then, because we are going to move on to all these different elements, right? We're going to look at all the different strategies. This is just one part of it, which is obviously, it's an important part, which is the teacher application process and the way. And obviously, you know, we're talking about my new term in that context. I wanted to ask you, like, other, like, that must be better then than other sort of whether that be an agency or whether that be another recruitment or advertising site that you use. Presumably you don't get that opportunity of having that sort of contact point, if you know what I mean, with all the talent pool.
What we're doing, and it's surprising, we've got 17 schools and we don't spend any money on advertising, and we haven't done so probably, I think I could confidently say that the last 150 people that we've recruited is without any adverts and without agencies. Now, we every now and then, if we have a great supply teacher in our school that's a musician and we can't get anyone, and they happen to be from a supply agency, will we then want to take them on? Yes, I get that. But what we don't do is we don't reach out to any agencies whatsoever, and we don't advertise. That puts the focus back on what is it that makes people want to work for people. So let's get those things right. Let's make ourselves an attractive proposition in the market so people want to work for us, and try and identify what are the factors people look for from an employer. And then let's go out and recognize and network with the talent and make sure that people feel that they can access us, they can come to us. And let's constantly keep the cycle of developing links with talented people as a thing that is done all year through. And let's do that at the highest levels in the organization. So that's not something you flog off to somebody else and say that's somebody else. Well, that should be sitting with the directors like myself, the CEO, and other people in the trust, because actually the biggest thing to improve schools is to improve teacher quality. And if you can bring in the best teachers, you're going to have the best schools. So we make that an absolute priority, that recruitment sits at the very top table, retention sits at the very top table.
How do you, when you say you've spent no money on advertising for 150 roles, because I mean, you could compare that probably to another school, and if you were to then put on the sort of rate that, you know, I've seen charged for advertising for roles, like £1,000 or something for like 2 weeks or something on certain platforms. So really what you're talking about there is potentially £300,000 that you haven't spent.
We it is very easily, I could say, in the last 3 years, we would have saved our schools close to £1 million in advertising costs that they would have spent on just standard adverts. Now, but I
still haven't really. What I'm trying to get at here is you've still got to reach those people. So
and that's the key thing. So our reach is around social media.
Right.
And we use a mantra, and we often call it, we turn up to the opening of an envelope. So because we know that people that work for us work quite locally to us and live quite locally to us, what we want to do is, actually, if there's a summer fair, we want to be there. If there's an event in any part of the community, if there's an open day in a mosque, we're there in the mosque. If there's a celebration event in the church, we're there. If it's in the temple, if it's a carnival, whatever it is, we want to be there because we want people to hear and know about us as a brand. Because actually, that element of marketing obviously sometimes gets this really toxic kind of feel, and people talk about it in a very toxic way about marketing and education. But marketing, it happens every day in all of our lives.
Hi, I'm Troy McClure. Sorry, that was...
my one's similar to that with the way I say my name, but I think for us it's really important to make sure people know us, people see us, we're visible. That's really important. Social media is incredibly important. People knowing what's it like. So the onus is on our school leaders to make sure that they engage with social media, because we want people to know what it would be like to work in our schools, what the teachers are like, what the head teachers like, what the leadership teams like.
But Sufyan, with that one, everyone's doing that. So how do you? So So number one, how do you differentiate between you and another school or another sort of organization doing the same thing? I mean, are you doing anything in particular different, or?
So everyone does social media. It's a bit like you can go on to any company and everyone's got an Insta page, everyone's got a Facebook page or a Twitter page. It's how effectively do you use it? And is there strategic thinking behind it? So for us, actually, we know that retention in the sector, it's about that whole kind of self-actualization. People want to feel that they're worthy. People want to be recognized. People want sense of belonging. People want inclusion. So we understand what are the things driving people away from the profession. We understand the well-being factor, the workload factor. And for us, it's about making sure that how do you so you identify the barriers for people wanting to work for any organization. How do you break those barriers down in the way your marketing message comes across? And how does it come across? So they might see our CEO doing roly-polies in a open day or whatever it may be. It's about actually he needs to look human, and people need to identify that he's like everyone else. He's a dad with two young boys in schools and so on and so forth. People want to be able to engage with people because people work for people. Brands and organizations are one thing, people work for people. So for us, the marketing strategy is bringing the people to life, bringing the brands to life, making sure that the things that matter to people are embodied in those brands, in the way those brands carry themselves. So yes, everyone's got a Twitter page. How do they actually bring all of those things I've said together in the way they deliver on their Twitter, in the way they get involved in local events? So we deliver a lot of local events that are loss leaders. I'm a business teacher, so they don't make us any money. A lot of money goes spent on them, whether it's a CPD in a jazz club, whether it's CPD in a children's petting farm where you can bring your kids along with yourself, whatever. All of those things are creating opportunities for people to be able to engage with us, to be able to understand that actually, if you turned up to our Luton Ed event, which is we want you to put your wild and wacky thoughts about how to change the education system. What we want to show people that we're open to ideas, and we like platforms where people can be wild, wacky, and crazy with what they reckon the system needs to change in, how it needs to change. But we want people to recognize we're open to listening to voices. And by putting events on like that, actually it links back into those things that we know matter to people. Having a voice, being able to shape the education in the school that they work in, they matter to people. So we want to make sure that that brand persona and the way we deliver on that brand persona is evident through our actions, through our social media, the way we carry ourselves, the way we deliver on national conferences or local conferences. It's about our values. So they matter, and they clearly are delivering the outcomes, because actually what we've shown is we've done the right things, and people are willing, are coming to work for us because they want to work for people who do the right thing at the right time.
Yeah, I mean, to sort of summarize what you've said there, that this is about projecting, showing people who you are, and sort of, enabling them to connect and network, and sort of almost feel part of it without being part of it yet, if that makes sense. Like, it's almost like, I feel like I know these guys, just through interacting with them on social media, right? That all makes sense. Just before, I'm going to ask another question in a minute, but I just want to give a shout out to everyone listening along, and thanks very much for joining us on Teachers Talk Radio tonight. It's an absolute pleasure to see everybody here. I'll give a little shout out to some listeners. We've got Lloyd James. Lloyd, thank you very much for listening this evening. Really do appreciate it, because I know people will be tired potentially on the first day back for a lot of people. Mr. Jones, good evening to you. Mrs. M, Peter, Mr. L, Yasmin, we've got Andy, we've got goodness, we've just got lots of people. Jasmine actually asked a question earlier, which I didn't address, which was in terms of how, which we might have time to come on to later, actually, which is how you give feedback to people who aren't successful. Because I know Kate sort of mentioned that earlier, that when she was applying for jobs, she's just got a new role for September, but when she was applying for jobs, she sort of was one of 35 applicants for a job, and literally it was like the reply she got was, there were 35 applicants, so tough luck, like, we haven't got time to sort of go into that because there was too many applicants for the job. So maybe later on we can come on to like Sophie, and how you give out like the feedback, or do you give out feedback to candidates who aren't successful? Maybe you could answer that now.
That's, I think, an area of development for all of us in the sector, because the feedback's really important, especially given the fact that if I'm putting on my kind of teaching school hat, where we've got new entries into the profession, they go to a job and they're not getting 1 or 2 or 3 interviews they might go to, and they don't get the job. They're repeating the same mistakes, and we wouldn't allow that in the class, because we'd say, actually, you've got to give feedback, because there's no point assessing the person again and again when they've made the same mistake 3 times. So the feedback part is really important. For us, I think what we tend to do is, if people are unsuccessful and employable, and that's trying to make it almost manageable. So the other day we had interviews for a SEND specialist to work across the Multi-Academy Trust. Now, I was listening in to see when Helen, who's our director, was deciding on who she wanted, that there was a couple of candidates that I knew that came via myself through social media. If they were unsuccessful, I wanted to make sure that they join our talent pool, especially if they were employable and of a good standard, and we feel that they can add value in our schools. Now, they may not have been successful, but I made sure I was a part of that feedback process and listening in, and I made sure I closed the loop with the person who didn't get the job, just to say, I'm sorry to hear you are unsuccessful, but we're really interested in you still keeping a keen interest in working for us. And what would that look like? Would you be interested in a different role? And I think that doesn't take long, but that goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Jasmine is again. Jasmine, thanks for all your comments tonight. Absolutely smashing. She has made a comment that says retention is an important issue that needs to be discussed. There's no point recruiting people only to have them leave. I think that's a really powerful point, Sufyan, isn't it? Because you can have the best recruitment in the country, but ultimately, if all those teachers leave within 1 to 2 years, then you're back to square one, aren't you?
Yeah, and there's 2 things. I think one is, we can sit there and say the retention issue is largely due to policy decisions around pay and so on and so forth. And I get the fact that pay is a massive factor, and I get the fact the cost of living crisis is a huge issue. But I think the thing that we can do in schools and we can control, rather than shifting everything on a policy issue, is how we treat people. And that brings us back to that kind of moral purpose, belonging, the need to be recognized, the need to be seen. So that equity element is really important, that giving people a voice, but also valuing staff. And this is one of the things that, when the supply in the system was high, and an area we perhaps became complacent in, was that, well, tough, if you want to leave, then you can leave, because we'll get a replacement. Because those days are now looking like they're gone for a lot of us, we've got to make sure when we get staff, we retain staff. And some of the things that you can do to retain staff don't necessarily involve money, and they don't involve massive expressions of big well-being events, and you have a whole school yoga event or something like that once a year and think that's the solution. The solution is actually, people want leaders to talk to them. People want to be able to talk to leaders. People want to be able to air their problems. People want people to understand the fact that actually they want a work-life balance, and they want their issues at home not to be left at home. Actually, I've got childcare challenges and I can't attend this CPD session. And are we going to try and be flexible? Are we going to try and be supportive? the most important thing, again, goes back to the non-monetary rewards, that as people, that pat on the back, that recognition, that appreciation of what every teacher's doing goes a longer way than any increment that we may offer in finance. And I appreciate in difficult times, that's hard to hear, especially if you're not getting paid enough. But it's a bit like when I was a student doing A-level business, I remember my teacher saying, going through Abraham Maslow's theory of needs and the hierarchy of needs, and my teacher talking to me and saying, if you had a choice between £50 and a pat on the back, what would you take? And as a kid in college, I said, you'd be absolutely insane taking the pat on the back over the 50 quid. Because at that time, at that stage in life, you're thinking about money. As you get older and what you realize, why are people leaving and why do people not want to work for organizations, stay in organizations, it's when they feel there's a lack of belonging, there's a lack of moral purpose, there's a lack of equity.
Yeah.
And it's when they're not being appreciated, when you're working really, really hard and you're slogging it with your planning and your marking and your assessment, and you're staying and doing the long hours and then not getting that pat on the back, it breaks people. And that's what we're seeing in the profession. Loads of people are broken and they're leaving.
Yeah. Nadira's commented, well-being is about doing things that affect their work-life balance. So directly impacting work-life balance. Thanks, Sufyan, for reiterating what I've been talking about for the last 18 months. Thanks for listening, Nadira. Maxine has commented, educational psychologist here. Hope that's okay. Well, of course it's okay, Maxine. We love all comments here from everybody. We also have a recruitment and retention issue in educational psychologist land. I'm interested in your thoughts on staff CPD, coaching and supervision. I'm not sure what you mean by supervision, but staff CPD and coaching. So important to invest in staff, says Maxine. Sufyan, any comments on that in terms of staff CPD and coaching being a vehicle for retention?
And that goes back to that kind of what can we do that's necessarily non-monetary around rather than paying people more. Well, actually, if people feel invested in, so that element of kind of job enrichment, job rotation, job enlargement, they're the kind of things that we know from the Industrial Revolution of when they try to get people motivated in factories. Well, actually, it's no different now. That actually, when you train and develop people want to develop. That's kind of innate in a lot of people, and accept the fact that not everyone necessarily wants to develop. But what does that development look like? And I think, again, the onus is now back on the difficulty for schools and school leaders is when you're asking people to stay back after school, after a long day's work, in challenging circumstances, in November when they've not seen daylight when they entered the school in the morning, and they're not going to see daylight as they leave. And then you put on a substandard in terms of quality CPD at 3:45 that goes on till 4:45 to 5:15. That's
like
not
a twilight.
Exactly. And that's not necessarily motivating. Now, that's not to say there's not a space for twilights. What is to say is actually teacher development, and what we see teacher development as is something that needs to be really thought through and considered at a leadership level. How often is teacher development and the quality and the impact of our CPD featuring as an agenda item on SLT agendas? If we're not talking about the most important thing, which is if we invest in our teachers and improve our teachers, we improve our school. If we talk about the roof leaks and the behavior by little Johnny in class X and the detentions and who's doing duties and duty spots, and we're not talking about how are we investing in our teachers, what does that investment look like? Is it bespoke? Are we calling all of these people to the training that actually doesn't apply to 70% of them or 25% of them and mastered that? Why did they have to sit through an hour and a half? How do we develop systems that are more forward thinking than what we've traditionally been used to, which is here's a set time and you turn up at a set time and somebody goes over some CPD? What we know is...
I want to ask you actually about this, and also a quick shout out because we've got Jack Worth here from NFEO. He's been doing some brilliant work in terms of sort of churning the numbers, let's say.
Yeah, he's a big fan of mine.
Well, he's a bit of a... Well, I'll tell you what, Sofian, he's turned up here. I've been trying to get him for an interview for about 17 months. That's a joke, actually, Jack. He's been genuinely busy, but what a god. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you want someone to give you some data, Jack Worth's your man.
Yes, 100%.
But I want to say, like, in terms of... I was going to ask you, like... Oh, actually, before I come back to that question, Kate, are you still there? If
Yep.
Kate's still there. Hello. I wanted to ask you, actually, when you've applied for all these, just sort of reflecting what Sofian said, when you've applied for all these jobs that you've gone for, what are the ones that you've applied for where you thought, I really want that job? What is it about that advert or that school or that something you've seen or felt where you thought, you know what, I'm going for that job or I want that job? What are the key words? What are the things that make you go for it?
Okay, well, I think so. The couple that I had first actually applied for, I was not only thinking really about location, but with the one that I've actually got, I was drawn to it because of the value basis that they had. So it's everything that he's already been saying. It's about, and when I was interviewed for this job, I said to them, a healthy workplace culture, it is fundamental. It's like non-negotiable for me because I've worked in child protection before, and I know how important it is to have a team around you where everybody's got your back, and that that you can offload to someone and you've got that sort of guidance and support. And I just commented to Maxine's comment where she's talking about supervision. So in other sectors like child protection and social work, we had supervision every 4 weeks where we would talk to a line manager, and that gives you that time to debrief and sort of get that guidance for your professional development. And you can review and reflect on your practice and any particular things that you're concerned about. And I was really shocked when I made the move into the education sector that doesn't happen. Because it's, that these are both professions that are challenging and work with children. And I found it surprising that something like supervision wasn't set up within schools.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, absolutely spot on. I want to. Lots of people are commenting, which is fantastic, and we've hit over 50 in the show live. So thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. And I think we've had over 300 already, sort of popping in and out. So that's awesome. I just want to say, sort of read this comment that's come in from a non-educator. Not a non-educator, as in anonymous educator, because that would be very mean of me to call somebody a nothing educator. So a non-educator says, yes, retention, but the Byzantine recruitment process needs massive change. Forms with the same thing in different ways, odd feedback, strange interview requests, the whole thing is ridiculous. Well, a non-educator, I think you've just joined in at exactly the right time, because if you checked out my new term, because if you have not yet, you need to click on Google and just type in my new term, all one word, all close together, because I'll tell you what, it's going to revolutionize the, as you call it, the sort of Byzantine recruitment process, and particularly the application process for you as a teacher. So highly recommend checking that out. But on that whole list of things, forms with the same thing in different ways, well, that's the thing that my new term deals with, because you fill in one form and then that is the same form that you use for every single job that you go for. Bob's your uncle. But the rest of it, when it says odd feedback, what they've said odd feedback, strange interview requests. I'd love to know, a non-educator, whether you could expand on that with strange interview requests. I remember once when I was asked to tap dance in an interview. No, I wasn't really, but I'm sure everybody has their story of things in an interview where maybe like a particular, like I know we can talk about like data tasks and stuff like that. Sofian, do you have any what you would consider sort of oddball stuff that you ask candidates to do when they apply?
No, because I think the problem is managing the ego of leaders who almost to an extent, sometimes we as leaders want to make people go through the hoops and processes to prove themselves, but actually, what are they proving? Because a lot of the time,
Wow. Yeah.
a lot is proven by the credibility of the application. And for us,
Yeah.
actually, it's about viewing an interview as a two-way process. It's going back to that edudate thing. It's two people reviewing each other. It's two people reviewing each other. You can't go into that date thinking, actually, this is a done to model that you're going to have to do this to prove to us. Well, actually, by doing that, you've proven to them you're probably not a worthy employer for them and for their talent to be nurtured and developed in that environment where you're making them do ludicrous things to get through a process that actually offer no level of insight or intelligence around why that person would be suitable for the role. Because again, some of it's, we've always done this and we're going to carry on doing this, or we just want to fill out and pack out a day. We don't need to fill out a day. If you are not going to look at that written task, then don't make them do a written task. If you're not interested, just because they now have to sit there and write for an hour and a half because you've got a gap that you can't fill, well, guess what? If you left them with a bit of Wi-Fi and left them alone in a room, they wouldn't mind.
Kate, did you have any like random stuff you had to do for interviews, like presume, or just like the standard stuff, like teach a lesson and whatever?
So they often want you to do a presentation about me, myself, and I, don't they? Which I find makes me cringe. You have to do a presentation about me, myself, and I.
Who does that?
Lots of them do it. They want you to talk about, or I had to bring an object to one actually, and they you had to explain why this object represented who you were. So I took a history book, which will be pleased to know.
That's brilliant. Hey, bring in an object that explains who you are.
Yeah.
Bloody hell.
Mainly it was the teaching and writing a letter to parents or something like that.
You've done that one as well? You had to write a letter as a task?
Yes, yeah.
Wow. That's so write about what?
I think if you were writing it to the parents of your future class. So I know some of my other colleagues have had to do other various things. I can't remember them at the moment, but I remember thinking that is odd. There are some things that are more complicated than others.
Sophia, what do you think? Would you ask a candidate to bring an object that represented them into the interview?
No, but I've heard that it is done. It's not the first time I'm hearing it. I've heard that it's done. But
I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad. I'm literally that's the first time I've heard of it, so I'm sort of just digesting it. But
to be fair, some of these wild and wacky ones that don't necessarily create a huge load of workload for someone in preparation for an interview, I'm not necessarily against. I reckon it just brings a dimension of creative thinking.
That's what I mean. It's sort of quirky, isn't it? It's sort of a bit different. But like, I want to go back something to what you said a few minutes ago, which was around like getting a candidate to do loads of tasks. You already sort of, I can't remember what you said, but something about ego. It was really good. It was like, if you already know who the person is, then why get them to do more? If that makes sense. Like, can you expand on that point again? Just because I don't want to paraphrase you.
I think a good quality application, the credentials of the individual, where they went to university, what A levels they did, what grades, and all of these things that we're privy to and we get to see on an application often demonstrate a very good insight into that person. If they've got school history and they've worked in other schools, again, you can look up the schools and you can look up the curriculums now online. You can see so much and such wealth of information that you can gather from the application process, that for you now to say, right, actually, and people do this, people say, I'm going to do a 2-day process because actually it's going to start 7 a.m, it's going to go on till 6 p.m, and in my school, to work in my school, you've got to absolutely sweat it, and this will give them a flavor of what it's like. Well, no, you've just given them a flavor of why they shouldn't work for you. And making things like that and putting tasks in eliminates people. It creates reasons for people not to work for you, because it's all about what you think people need to demonstrate to prove to you as an individual and to your ego that they're good enough to work for you, as opposed to let's look at the job and let's look at the spec and let's look at what will allow us to get the best possible insight into whether that person meets that specification.
Yeah, spot on. Wayne, this is one for you from somebody listening. Daddy Isio has commented saying it would be nice to have a feature on My New Term where international applicants know what jobs offer visa sponsorship. I wonder whether that's something that you're sort of aware of, because I know there are sort of a lot of international applicants looking to get jobs in the UK as well.
Yes, correct. And this is actually something that's come up a few times now, because there is an increasing number of people from outside the UK, obviously, applying to schools. So it's actually a feature that we recently developed, and candidates that are searching can see which schools offer visa sponsorship for particular roles, and it means that candidates are obviously applying to schools that they know that visa sponsorship is potentially available. But likewise, schools aren't inundated with applications if, of course, they're not able to offer visa sponsorship. It's a very complex and often expensive thing for employers to go through to be able to offer that sponsorship. So obviously only selected ones tend to do so. So that filter is actually already available on My New Term.
Okay.
That we developed.
So you can already do that now.
Yeah, they can do that now. Yeah, again, it's all come from feedback. Every little feature that we develop at My New Term comes from feedback from candidates, from employers, and it's that cycle of just continually making it better and better and adapting to changes that's constantly happening within the sector.
Spot on. Sophie, another comment here from Peter, who said this talk is interesting. I work in Swindon as a maths teacher. I've been at my current school for 9 years and I've no intention of leaving, but the opposite, we have the opposite regarding applicants. I'm surprised every time we get an applicant for a maths teacher, nobody wants a job. Now, I want to sort of ask you, because I know you put a thread out on Twitter like a couple of weeks ago about this, about your sort of quest to recruit and stuff and the challenges of doing that. Are we at sort of crisis point here? Because I know Wayne mentioned earlier through My New Term, you can see that there are regional variations in terms of like some schools are getting 70 applicants for a job. Other schools are struggling to get any. I want to put a little anecdotal thing in here. I got an email through this morning from an agency, which was representing one particular school. Now, I'm actually going to pull it up on my phone now, so I can actually read out. I won't name the agency, obviously, or the school, but I'll just read out sort of what the situation is for this. If I can find it, hang on 2 seconds. I can't find it, but I'll just like paraphrase what it was. Basically, said this school is recruiting for, and it listed 10 full-time positions for September now. So in my head, I'm going, well, number one, the deadline has passed for people being able to put in their resignations. And that's another thing I wonder whether we need to look at changing as well, actually, for this recruitment and retention, particularly recruitment, is the windows for resignations and hiring. I don't know whether we need to sort of think, hang on a minute, has the world changed? Do people want things faster? Do we need to start looking at how things are flexible and how things are pragmatic a bit more? And do the teacher resignation windows as they are now fit in with that? As a question I might ask later on. But anyway, this email came through and it was 10 positions in one school for September. And I just thought, wow, like how are they going to fill that? Sophie, and I don't know whether you want to talk a little bit about the current challenges, the landscape, and how tough it is out there.
It is tough, and I think I don't like the use of the term crisis normally because it suggests something really serious, something that requires the very highest level of intervention. But having a picture of both the ITT element, the ECT element through our teaching school, and what people are feeling in terms of how they see themselves in the profession, how difficult it is to get people to apply into being teachers, how difficult it is then to retain either ECTs or even ITTs to the United Kingdom, because they flying off to Dubai will get you a 4-day week and a lot more money. Going to Saudi will get you a lot more money. Going to the Far East will get you more money and a better lifestyle. How do we retain them? How do we get them at ITT? How do we then retain them for ECT? And once they're ECTs, how do we make sure that they stay in the profession? And the one thing that's coming through, and a lot of it's anecdotal in terms of what we're hearing from people, but more often than not, people are struggling to recruit. People are struggling to recruit because the talent doesn't exist in some localities. That even if you are a really strong school with a strong brand and you're doing all the right marketing, you can't create from magic dust physics teachers that don't exist. You can't create these music teachers and these French and German teachers that don't exist. But the traction around things like the blog, the thread, if you see the thread I put out, and Lorraine Hughes, our deputy CEO, put a blog out on LinkedIn, and again, it got lots of interest because people identify it as a massive issue that they're relating with, and they understand the pain off. Now, there are schools in most places, and this kind of brings me on to something that I've felt for a long time. The dangers of a crisis like this is that it creates a rich school versus poor school kind of divide within the country. So if we go by some of the data, what we know is, and Jack would have kind of confirmed this, that actually some of the better teachers tend to end up working in more affluent areas. More affluent areas tend to have a higher proportion of better performing schools, and therefore people want to live around there. Whereas challenging schools typically aren't only challenging, they don't face their challenges because they've had a head teacher that perhaps has driven the standards into the ground, but they've normally driven finances and operations and the building into the ground. Somebody takes over this really challenging school and wants to make a difference in a challenging context where the kids desperately need a good teacher. Finding good teachers in those environments is impossible because they have no money, they can't compete on price, they can't give people amazing career opportunities and TLRs and responsibility points. And those schools in this crisis will suffer. So those schools in poorer communities, the poorer schools in performance, are going to struggle a lot more, while richer schools financially in better, more affluent areas with higher performance may weather the storm to an extent. Now, I accept it's a generalization to an extent, but what we will see is the improvement factor of some schools. How can you improve if you have no teachers? There's no point coming back to see me and inspecting me, or coming to try and assess where I am if I've not been able to fill 20 gaps or 10 gaps. We had a school within our trust. It had 40 plus vacancies last summer. 40 plus vacancies. Now, we filled those vacancies, but there's going to be similar schools up and down the country on coastal towns that will struggle to fill those vacancies.
So this school you mentioned, the one with the 40 vacancies in a year, whatever it was, right? Are you able to fill that? I mean, what happens if you? My question is, this school that I got an email from this morning, well, the agency, not the school, if they don't fill those roles, those 10 roles they've got going that are all full-time positions, I'm guessing then you have to use agency staff, and then it's a massive budgetary issue. Or, what happens? What does a school do in that situation?
Well, the thing is, it goes back to that point. The poor school already that was struggling because they couldn't recruit, they had to spend money on adverts, and they still didn't manage to recruit. They now have to spend on agency, which will tear through their budgets, and that school will struggle to come out of that cycle. It's very similar to the cycle of poverty around people who are struggling with poverty. Actually, unless there's intervention around how we support people that are struggling, unless there's intervention around how we support schools that are struggling financially, whether it's trying to get people attracting talent. Now, there's people that, why would you go to the most challenging coastal town schools? Why would you go into the inner city with really challenging schools where 3 miles up the road, the leafy suburbs start and the school there is giving you a bit more money? Now, it's good to say, well, there's people in the system that want to do it for the moral purpose and the goodwill, but the people in the system are reducing. The system doesn't have enough people in it, and it has more jobs than it has people. And we're not creating more talent coming through. So it will be difficult. Honestly, the answer to that is schools will have to start working on how they make themselves attractive propositions, even if they're in difficult contexts. And I believe that because some of our schools are in very challenging contexts, but our schools have worked tirelessly to make themselves attractive propositions where people feel that it may be a challenging school in a challenging geographical area with the demographics that it serves, but it's rewarding because being a part of that organization and that school under that leadership is something that will be rewarding, and I'll be more fulfilled being there. I'll belong when I'm there. There's people that look like me there. I'll feel included. I'll have a voice. And those factors still override, even in real extreme cases. We're going back to the fact that actually 40 people that joined that school came from the really challenging, really good schools and outstanding schools, joined a really challenging context. Why? Because they believe in the leadership and they believe in the vision, they believe in the moral purpose. So it does happen, but as schools, we've got to open our shop front and our doors and say to people, come see who we are as people, see what we stand for, see what matters to us, and see why you can be a part of this journey and be more fulfilled as a teacher. Because actually, deep down, we know you came into teaching to make a difference. Now, we're going to tap into that by showing you we're going to enable you to make a difference, and we're going to support you. We're going to thank you. We're going to reward you.
Can I ask, and I also want to ask Wayne actually about this as well. Might start with Wayne on this one actually. Is I saw a tweet by Sam Strickland a couple of days ago, which I completely agreed with, when he said we need more radical approaches to teacher recruitment and retention, particularly. And one of the examples he gave was sort of a 4-day week. He mentioned that. But other things that I've sort of talked about myself before are things around more flexi opportunities, more work from home opportunities, more PPA. You can leave the school site and premises and go home if you have a PPA in an afternoon. More opportunities to work at the times that you want to work. Less expectation on a teacher to have to work during set time periods that might not be the best for them. And I go back to the sort of 1990s, early 2000s. My parents were teachers. The whole, the head teacher's there in the office watching the cars that are still in the car park by 4:30 or whatever it might be, or 5 o'clock or whatever it might be, to give them brownie points. That sort of attitude, trying to, and that attitude has, changed a lot. But teachers out there who are applying for jobs now are surely coming out of COVID and looking at their friends who work in all these other industries, who are now looking at their working patterns in a very different way. Teaching hasn't changed at all, but other jobs have changed. And in fact, even before COVID, those jobs were starting to change. But now it's been a sea change. So as a graduate, or somebody who even has started out as a teacher, and they're looking at their peers who work in professional workplaces, and they're looking and going, we are getting a raw deal here. We're getting a raw deal in terms of pay. We're getting a raw deal, but more marked in terms of the lifestyle with which we can actually do our job. So, Wayne, I want to ask you first, is there anything that my new term does or can do to support the teacher who wants to work, whether they want a part-time role or whether they just want to work in a more flexible sort of environment? Or is there anything that my new term can do to support this general approach to trying to change the sort of culture of recruitment and retention?
So it's quite a big question that you've asked there.
That
Tom,
is a very big question.
Lots that I could kind of unpick and dive into. If I kind of go to the exact question that you've asked about my new term specifically, when candidates apply for any school job, they are asked, do they want to apply on either a part-time basis or flexible working or as a job share?
Okay.
So as a result of that, it does allow candidates to kind of express that as an interest,
That's good.
and then the schools can review those applications, etc. But obviously, part of that is, down to that individual school about whether that is something that they would, be willing to accept.
Yeah.
Is it just easier to have one permanent FTE teacher as opposed to having as a job share? Or
but do you, like, with the schools on my new term, do you sort of ask them, look, are you sort of open to job share, flexi, part-time applicants? And
correct. Yeah. So it's very, very easy for candidates to filter by part-time roles, for example. Schools will obviously specify it's part-time, full-time, term time only, all year round. So it's very easy to do that. And there is an increasing number of schools that, for certain support roles, I would say, they may express that obviously home working is an option. So there's a particular example I can think of recently of more like a data role within a trust, and it explicitly states within the advert itself that this can be a remote role. It doesn't have to be based. And I know of certain, again, typically support roles, so like maybe a HR director, for example, or within back office, they can be feasibly completed remotely a lot of the time. And they're not common within the sector, but they could become increasingly more so if it's really encouraged. Teaching is always going to be hard though, because we've seen obviously through the experiences of COVID, and we've been through what it's like to teach remotely and online. Yeah. It's really difficult, and being in that classroom environment in person does make all the difference. So there are elements to it that obviously could work within that of PPA time and potentially more flexibility. And there are some schools that I know of that obviously don't follow what I'd call maybe the traditional academic year of, let's say, 6 weeks summer holiday. I know of some schools, I'm pretty sure it's like the 5 weeks plus then the 2 week holiday, 5 weeks, 2 weeks. Again, few and far between, but I am aware that there are those types of things which obviously suit some people, of course, and wouldn't others. But there is always going to be some form of limitations. But I think with the ever increasing development and adoption of technology and how quickly things are changing, across the board, like there is real things to be looking forward to and excitement for the future.
Yeah, because I wrote, Wayne, full disclosure, like back in 2016, I wrote this article, which looking back now, it is slightly cringe, but I really enjoyed writing it at the time, which was like the future of education. So this was in 2016 that I wrote this, right? This was like years before COVID or any of the sort of like remote stuff that had to happen. Anyway, in this article I wrote, I was like, my two questions were, how can you make it more sustainable for teachers? And also, how can you integrate new technology? And I know I got a load of stick at the time for this article. Well, not a load of stick, but many people were sort of like, yeah, this is really interesting. And actually, Microsoft found it really interesting. Or not Microsoft, Google. That's a bad mistake by me. Google found it really interested and published it on their sort of education platform at the time. But there were many comments as well that were sort of critical. But the gist of it was that, and I know this is controversial, but the gist of it was that you would have 4 days of sort of, if you like, in inverted commas, normal, timetabled teaching days, and then on the 5th day, or actually, I think in my model it was every afternoon. So it was a morning of teaching in inverted commas, normal timetable teaching day, and then every afternoon, all the students would go into a giant mega hall, like the school hall, almost sat in sort of like an exam desk sort of format, and they would be basically plugged in to my original thinking in 2016 was actually live lesson content. So a little bit like during COVID, when there was like children of key workers in school doing live lessons with teachers, a little bit more like that, sort of like one-to-one tutoring. But also, you think about Oak National Academy and all the other sort of developments that we've seen, whether there'd be some integration there. But ultimately, the idea was that there would be hundreds of students in a giant hall for hour, 90 minutes a day. Rest of the time, they'd be on their normal timetable. And that would almost then free up, 80% of the teaching staff to either go home or to work on their professional development, or to work with small clusters of students who needed particular intervention or whatever. Right now, I understand that is a very sort of, at the time it was controversial, and it probably still is now, but there is still, in my opinion, something to think about there, because I still am not sure whether the model that we currently have is sustainable in terms of getting teachers in, keeping them in, and competing with other industry professionals in other areas, and obviously attracting people into the profession, keeping them in there. I like what you said, Wayne, though, about more the being, even you having that option when people sign up for my new term, of being able to click, do I want flexi work? Do I want part-time? Do I want to work in somewhere where, it promotes flexi work? All those things I think are like something that probably wasn't there, 10 years ago as much. So I think that's a really positive development. Sufyan, I wonder whether you have any commentary on what I've just said, what Wayne said, and the original question about more radical things that we can do to sort recruitment.
Clearly, you're like the Nostradamus of education back in 2016 and foresaw everything that was coming.
That's it, Sufyan. That's it. That's exactly what it was.
But I think there's kind of a couple of races now, like our kind of equivalent to the race to the moon. Like, what is it that's going to stand out for the schools, the multi-academy trusts, that weather the storm and basically get the talent? One is, I think, the marketing, the branding. It's got to become a part of what we do, making sure that people know what we're about. That part has to be high on the agenda. The moral purpose, belonging, and the inclusion part, and the well-being, so that looking after the people when they're with you and getting that right is the second. And the third for me is that flexibility, because the market has changed, the times have changed. You have an option of having no teacher, and in some cases not even able to access supply because of the short supply of supply that exists again within the system. You've got to then think, right, am I better off having that teacher that said that they would love to be back in the classroom and they're brilliant, but they want to drop their children off in the morning and they want to pick them up after school? Am I better off having them from 9:30 to 2:30? Well, I think all of the options and things that you mentioned around flexibility, around how often, this almost part-time teachers for a long time have got stick, because you know what, actually part-time ruin your timetable and split classes. And well, actually, in the times we're in, if you want to get ahead on that race to get people, talent does exist, but there's trapped talent in the market. That trapped talent is people that are sitting at home or out of the system because the system was unable to be agile and flexible enough to work around the talent. What we now have to do is accept the fact that this notion that people have to change to adapt to schools, those days are gone. Schools and multi-academy trusts need to adapt their approaches to fit the flexibility and agility that people are looking for in organizations, to say, actually, you can be a great parent and do the school runs because that's what you want to do and that's high on your priority, and be a great teacher, and we're going to make it work. You can work part-time. You can do, after school sessions because you're just interested in doing some interventions. You can even help out. Actually, we want to reduce the load on our teachers for doing interventions, whether it's in holidays or on weekends. We're going to use those that have retired around how can we bring them into support with intervention with small part-time contracts, whatever it may be. Flexible working is the way forward, and it's got to be something that we've got to start exploring as organizations to capture that talent.
Yeah, I love what you said there about, I think you used the phrase trap talent, people sort of out of the system that the system can't accommodate. I mean, I think it's interesting that, like, when people are going for jobs now, I do wonder whether applicants should be, I mean, the system like My New Term helps this, I guess, because there's now a whole plethora of information, I'm guessing, at your fingertips, Sufyan, from My New Term, where you can look at, lots of details about a candidate, rather than just, like, 20 years ago, it would have been like a really sort of sketchy CV, maybe more, and maybe an application. But, I'm guessing now you've got lots and lots of stuff to look at. But my point is, do you think that applicants should be asking more questions and actually making more demands? Do you think they should actually be saying, you know what, I am a very valuable commodity. I do have these things that I want. I feel as though there's still that element with some people where we're thinking, is it rude for me to ask for this? Or is it bad for me to ask for this? Or is it, like, not a teacher thing to do to say, I want this? Do you know what I mean? Like, do you think this?
I totally get it. And a few years ago, when I first connected with you, Tom, one of the reasons where you were one of the outspoken voices talking about burnout, stress, the lack of well-being in our profession. And I think you were speaking of what a lot of people were feeling. I think the difference is that the low supply in the system, the low number of ITT coming through, the low number of ECTs means the voices when you were making that noise a few years back, and it perhaps was treated by people as almost being nuisance, is now actually, we've got to listen to those voices, because you were a great history teacher, and actually you could quite easily be lost to the system because the system was not flexing to meet your needs. If you're going for a job, and if you know that actually well-being is something you're struggling with, and perhaps depression is something you're struggling with, or stress management is something you struggle with, I think it's about saying, I love history. I love teaching history. I'm brilliant in the classroom, but I've got to tell you that I've got to really look after these aspects of myself, because in the last couple of jobs I had, I burnt out. But are you the kind of employer that can support me in getting the best out of me under the best conditions and flexible conditions that allow me to be the best me? And I think that
it's sort of like being honest, isn't it, as well? It's sort
100%.
of like, like when you turn up for a job saying, look, not being, it's not about being rude. It's not about being like, I want this and I want that. It's not that, but it is being like, I am who I am. This is my experience. I'm not sort of gonna, like, try and oversell myself, but equally I'm gonna ask for what I want. I'm going to say clearly what I want and actually ask all the questions. Like, there's been, I'm going back 15 years now. In my first teacher interviews I went for, and by the way, I'm still teaching, mate. I don't know how. But
brilliant.
So I'm still present tense on history teaching, just about. But 15 years ago, like, I never, when they said at the end, are there any questions you have? Like, like, I think we used to sort of say, here's a good question you could ask at the end. Like when I remember when I was teacher training, they were like, here's 3 questions you could ask at the end of the interview. They were like stock generic questions, like, you should ask about your work-life balance. Whereas I think like it's good we're starting to move past that and be like, right, no, actually, think about yourself, think about what you want, and actually then address those questions.
It will also tell you a lot about them, because that whole going back to an interview is that dating process. Actually, if you really reveal your human self and show that I'm a human and I've got some challenges I'm trying to work around. I love the reason I've got that moral purpose and moral drive of why I teach. I'm effective in the classroom, but I want to present this to you. How you respond to that will say a lot about them as an organization. And those organizations that are still stuck in the dark ages, or as somebody said, the Byzantine times, well, they're going to struggle, because actually with the shortage of supply in the system, unless you're able to be agile enough and adaptive enough to work to the needs of the market, you're not going to get the best talent.
Yeah, absolutely. Now I've got Moomin and also Kat Howard has joined us. So I'm going to go first to Moomin and see if Moomin has something to say on any of this. If you want to unmute yourself, bottom left, mate. Hopefully that'll work. There you go.
Oh, sorry, I didn't know I'd put myself on speaker.
Not a problem. Oh, really? Okay. Goodbye, and good to see you.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's good to hear your voice. Kat, maybe you didn't do it.
I didn't do it by accident. It was deliberate. Thank God for that, for your sake anyway. I think it's really interesting and really resonates with a lot of conversations that I'm having at the moment around recruitment. And I wonder whether some of this, like some of what's sitting behind a lot of the conversations about like good places to work and not so effective places to work, is this, I think, systemic issue that you see with school leadership and educational leadership, and the fact that we don't really prepare people for like line managing other people. And so on the one side of this argument, you've got kind of teachers saying that, you know, my flexible working request wasn't accommodated for. I haven't been accommodated for in terms of that human aspect that Sufyan is talking about. But on the other side of that, we're perhaps missing a trick in terms of preparing people for what it means to line manage effectively and manage people. And if I compare my experience in education to my experience in finance, you went through like a 4 to 6 week induction process before you even assumed a role. So things like HR processes, financial management, flexible working policy, and that kind of what we used to call kind of career-long care. So not just thinking about induction when somebody walks through the building to work at that organisation, but also when they want to start a family, when they're looking at winding down for retirement. What does that package look like? What does secondment look like? And that's, you know, as a really established tool to take care of people in actually a systematic way. So I think there's a couple of things that are just coming through, making me think about on the other side of this conversation, is to what degree we actually prepare people to be able to kind of manage a team of people and take care of a team of people in a really effective way, so that they feel pretty equipped to do that when they come to that role, rather than, you know, what we know and we've perhaps learned from ECT induction and everything, is that it's not a baptism of fire. So that we're not putting people into middle leadership roles or senior leadership roles where they haven't necessarily had that exposure to HR processes, you know. And yeah, just listening to you guys just talk then made me think about that's perhaps the systemic issue that's sitting behind this, is we can talk about kind of bringing that assertion to what you need and asking for what you want, and that is really important. But part of that dual narrative is, how do we prepare people to know how to have those conversations, know how to respond effectively to those conversations, I suppose.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, I'm not necessarily saying that. Like, yeah, it's a difficult one, because what you don't want to do is obviously be rude. Like, no one wants to be rude.
And I don't think it is rude asking for what you want. But I also want to make sure that the person that I'm going to ask, knows how to respond, knows what I'm asking for. So if I'm coming to somebody and saying, do you know what, I need flexible working because I've got 3 children in 3 different places of childcare. I need you to accommodate for me. How are you able to do that? I need that person on the other side to go, okay, so these are our options, because they've got really healthy mental models of what it means to support employees with flexible working. And if they haven't got that, then what are we doing as a system to really prepare them to have those conversations, I suppose?
Yeah. Sufjan, I don't know whether you want to sort of comment on that.
No, I think Kat hit the nail on the head with the fact that actually, are we doing enough in the system to train people around how to manage humans? So there's lots around specialisms around teaching and learning and around behavior, around leadership. But does the leadership element actually, is what we're training people around leadership, is it contextually relevant to the times we're living in a crisis, where actually understanding that human leading people is a massive part of the role? Like this concept, I always find it fascinating that just because you're a great footballer does not mean that you're going to be a great manager. Frank Lampard, throw that out there, because actually the two are very different skills. What we have in education that does happen a lot is, if you're a great teacher and if you're a great head of year, you suddenly start climbing the ladder. Does that mean that you've got the skill set to equip you to deal with managing humans, human emotions through challenging times, dealing with, how do you deal with someone who's stressed? How do you deal with someone who's got well-being challenges? How do you deal and support someone with workload issues? That actually the factors that are creating barriers for retention and stopping people from staying in this profession, how do we train leaders to be experts in that? So they might have that domain expertise in the subject area, but we're not equipping them to manage humans. And what a lot of people are saying, and I keep kind of reiterating this point, people want to be led by people, and they want their emotions to be understood, not like the robot, but like a human. They want another human to be able to empathize with them, to be able to support them, to understand them, to understand that they've got the same needs to grow and kind of self-actualize and become something, rather than people not connecting with people. And I think when people leave employment, and I get to speak to a lot of people that leave a school and are looking for a job, and often they're leaving not because of money and not always because of progression, because they don't feel human enough in that school. How do we do that without training people? And I think Kat really hit it with the fact that we've got to train our leaders to be better at managing people, because that'll go a long way in the retention factor.
Right, that's a great way to finish. Unfortunately, we've run out of time. It's been a wonderful 97 minutes of conversation. So a huge thanks to Sufjan, to Wayne, to Kate, to Kat for calling in, to Moomin for calling in by accident and calling in again, possibly by accident. Moomin, are you there again?
I am there, but I'm gonna next time I'm gonna call in, talk properly. I did have something to say, but I'll leave it to next time.
Okay, do it next time. We definitely. But yeah, it's been a fantastic conversation, and a huge thanks, a particular thanks to My New Term for supporting the show tonight. And if you're not familiar with My New Term and you're either a teacher or a school leader, so a teacher looking for a job or a school leader looking to recruit, then it is absolutely well worth your time to go to mynewterm.com and just have a look at the offering that they are giving, because it's something that it's something that I didn't click. I didn't click the clap button, by the way. I don't know who did. Was it Sufjan? Maybe was it Nathan?
I did. I just saw somebody else do it, and then I googled how to do it because I wanted to do it as well.
Brilliant. But definitely, like on a genuine level, it really annoys and frustrates me how much money gets ploughed into the sort of recruitment black hole, the void, by schools, and My New Term is part of the solution in that, or could be part of the solution for you for that. So the teacher, but also the school leader. So well worth checking out. Massive thanks to Wayne for supporting the show tonight. Top man. And also to Kate for coming on. Final thanks is to Nathan, my administrator. This show will be available as a podcast in the next couple of days. So if you listen to your podcasts on Spotify, Apple, Google, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, Samsung, I could go on. We're listed on 12 different platforms. Amazon Music. You can shout to your box and say, play Teachers Talk Radio. It'll play us. Play Wayne Cartmel. It'll play Wayne. Okay, so do that, and it'll be there. That'll be in a couple of days' time. So if you've got a colleague or a friend and you think, you know what, I've listened to a bit of this, it was really cool, it was really useful, please wait for the podcast to come out and then send them a link to that. Of course, you can also listen to it on this link on Twitter, the same link that it started on tonight. So we will be back on Teachers Talk Radio tomorrow with more shows, and tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. We've got a special show with Pearson MFL, which is going to be really interesting. A panel of 6 contributors talking all things modern foreign languages. So if you're here at 7:30 p.m. Tomorrow evening, that's definitely one to tune into, with Darren Lester hosting. That'll be absolutely mint. Have a fantastic evening, everybody, and I hope your first week back is going well. See you later.
You've been listening to Teachers Talk Radio. Tune in live and listen back at ttradio.org. We look forward to hearing from you next time on Teachers Talk Radio.